and the track Follow Your Road. This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us via Zoom at WZRD, Michael Jackson, jazz journalist all around, and interdisciplinary artist all around. Welcome to WZRD, Michael.
Hello there. How are you?
Very, very well. Very well. So good to have you with us. So, Michael, we were playing a couple of your tracks from The Girl from Ochi, and those were just wonderful. How many tracks are you planning altogether for that album?
Well, there are 11 originals on there, all kinds of stuff from stomping Chicago blues to bossa, to spoken word, to balladry, to a funk workout with Corey Wilkes blasting on the trumpet, and a bit of reggae in there, all interspersed with lots of jazz soloing, with everybody having a blow on most of the tunes. So some great cats. I'm very proud of them all. 18 musicians in all on there.
Who was the composer for all the tracks, or was it a compilation? Like everybody was doing their composing?
Well, I wrote the tunes.
Okay. I
wrote all the tunes, but the guys, you know, they do their thing, man. I mean, it's jazz, but it's hopefully my idea, my concept with the record was to make a recording that people played more than once. As a reviewer, as you can see all the CDs behind me, and yourself, you know all about it. Sometimes you'll play something once, you'll review it, and you won't pick it up again. So I wanted to make a record that was spirit lifting and you know, some danceable elements, and bring that out rather than everybody think I'm clever, which I'm not terribly interested in. I'm quite clever, but I'm not as clever as a lot of people I know. So I wasn't wanting to impress anyone, really. I wanted them to feel it, you know. And I think I achieved that on some of those tracks.
Yes, I did. We played them, and they were awesome. Okay, so since you have some insight about what makes a track, what does make a track entice a listener to want to play it again and again? What's the magic formula, would you say?
Well, I played in a lot of blues, kind of Latin bands, and other bands coming up that were get across types of groups. You know, I played in a ska group for years. So the title track, I was in that band. We toured all over Europe for 10 years. Everybody could dance to ska and reggae, you know. So there's a simplicity, really, but allied to, you know, sophistication on the part of the improvisers. With the Gal from Ochi, I had a solo, and I decided that I'd heard it enough, and I wanted to hear a voice from Jamaica speaking. And I wrote some patois, which is a little bit presumptuous. And I worked with a lady who lives in Rogers Park, who corrected some of my patois errors. And we had a lovely collaboration. She came over my house during the pandemic. And, you know, I wanted to celebrate the culture of Jamaica, and just put some of the real stuff in there. And, you know, I had her perform over my solo. So if you're not interested in jazzy solos, you don't have to listen to me. You can listen to her, and the other way around. So, but also I had some great beats on there. There's the legendary Mackay McCraven in the background, great bass player Jake Vinsel, great trombone player Johnny Showtime, all contribute to make it what it is, which I think is fabulous.
So that was your friend from Jamaica that was speaking over the Girl from Ochi when the music was playing. That was her, right?
Yes, she actually, I was looking for someone,
Mhm.
and I found her. She runs a store on Howard Street. She's called Lady B. I've slightly lost touch with her at the moment, but she's wonderful, and she's a real character, and you can hear that. And she has a connection with Ochi itself. So she may be over there now because she doesn't like the winter here, and who can blame her?
Right.
But if Lady B, if you're out there, I want to come round and give you some CDs.
Yes, Lady B, we'll visit you too. Well, Michael, what came first for you? Because you have your hand in so many different fields. Was it jazz, photography, art, or journalism?
Well, I think it must be art making, picture making that came first. I was always drawing obsessively, actually very violent cartoons when I was a kid. I was obsessed with American Westerns and the usual suspects, Marvel Comics and all that. But I learned a lot of fancy words from Marvel Comics, like Leviathan and pusillanimous. I learned that from Marvel Comics. So the narrative aspect and writing was always part of the cartoons. And I had a similar, I had some kind of FBI, CIA character, I forget his name, that I wrote lots of books about, which was just text. And, kids do this kind of thing, but I was always interested in writing, and I was a bit of a poet, a precocious poet when I was a kid. And I used to, stand in front of audiences if they were there at festivals in Yorkshire, performing my poetry, which was kind of a little agonizing probably if you were in the audience. But yeah, so writing then was always something. And I had a bit of a flair for English, as I was told at school. I eventually got into journalism through necessity, however. I was actually playing a wedding with a band and looking to move to London from Brighton, where I'd been to college. And the person whose wedding it was said, "Oh, you should come work at where I work at this Listings Limited company in London." And they provided stories for The Guardian, The Daily Telegraph, The Evening Standard, all the big dailies in the UK. So I started working for them for several years. And that's really what got me into journalism, paying the rent,
So that was like a newswire in the UK. Is it similar to our maybe Associated Press, Reuters, something like that? The listing service in the UK.
Well, I don't know. It was in a way it was quite odd because I was working for politically different papers. I mean, The Guardian is kind of left wing. The Daily Telegraph was more right wing, and yet the same company was supplying everybody. I used to write a little more for the Telegraph, like a paragraph, and I would compile what was to be checked out that week, every week in The Guardian, which is a very influential and great newspaper in England, and worked with, John Fordham, who would do the some of the main critical pieces, and I would support him with a whole plethora of stuff from, through Scotland, Ireland, all over the British Isles. It was a wonderful job, and other freelance work came in during that period. I worked for a magazine called Jazz on CD, midweek. We had this publication called Arts Advance, which worked way in advance, figuring out the trends and what was coming up, like 6 to 9 months ahead, what to look for. Very interesting place to work.
When you were young and you said that you performed poetry in front of audiences at festivals, how old were you then? And did you have any stage fright? Did you ever have any stage fright?
Oh, I was horribly young. Yes. I don't know how young, probably 10 or 11-ish or something, And there weren't many contenders in these competitions. for original verse. So I used to win the competition. I used to get these medals. I don't know where they are now. If I could find them, I'd wear them, you know, like Mark Spitz around my Mark Spitz. No one knows who Mark Spitz is. I should be thinking of the other guy. Who's the other guy? The big swimmer with the huge wingspan.
Slips my mind, but I do know Mark Spitz.
Oh, good for you. Same vintage. Yeah. So,
now, but however, so you were 10, and were there many other? Were there many other children around who were also poets? Not even many adults around, it seems, right? You were.
well, yeah. So frequently I'd be like, I don't know, one of three. So when I say I won, the competition wasn't particularly stiff, but it was unusual. I used to love polysyllabic words, and some of my poems are hideously pretentious. There's one I wrote about bonfire night, which my birthday's on November the 4th, which is close to bonfire night, if you know about the history of Catholics v Protestants in the UK. And I can remember one line was, what was it? I don't know. Configurations. It was, of course, a conflagration. It wasn't a bonfire, you know, it was, probably insufferable. I used to read the dictionary for fun, and I used to always look at whether it was Latin or Middle English or all this stuff. I was very fascinated by the roots of words and where they come from, you know.
So did this fascination with the roots of words ever affect your art and your interest in jazz?
Well, I think there's a correlation with jazz and wordsmithery. In my opinion, a lot of jazz is basically a bunch of tongue twisters. You know, riffs and licks that you hear in bebop. Guys like Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker were very witty, and they used words and puns. I found are very popular amongst jazz musicians. You know, a lot of jazz musicians are very eloquent and, you know, smart with words, and they're smart with notes and combinations. And music and jazz is just another language. So it's one that's crosses all borders, of course, hopefully. Yeah.
So when you studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, did you have to submit a portfolio in order to be admitted?
I did submit a portfolio, and it was interesting. Americans, or at least at graduate school at the Art Institute, were really more interested in concepts than craft. In England, there's a lot of great, there's a great tradition of, you know, Thomas Bewick, printmaking wise, all kinds of Rowlandson and all the great etchers, Cruikshank, you know, satirical commentary, of course, in those pieces. But over here, I don't know, there was kind of an attitude. So I had a lot of pop art pieces for my portfolio, which didn't translate. I had some success with a triptych, as I pretentiously called it, about the Blue Peter presenters, which was a kids program when I was young. People over here don't really know those people, although the screen prints, there was one of Val Singleton, who was on this kids program, and everybody thought it was Rhea Perlman over here, the image. I don't know whether that helped me, but basically I don't think I would have got in were it not for one print that was somewhat disturbing. It was a print of my father, deceased in the hospital. And I happen to know that this is what got me into the School of the Art Institute, because I had a friend who was a year above me who was on the committee that chose incoming graduate students. And she said that Karen Savage, who was the then chair of the department, said, "Stop," when she saw my slide, which I called Dad Dead. And it was a picture screen print of my father on his deathbed. And it's quite fascinating how that came about, because it talks about why I do photography in the first place. And one of the principal reasons, I think, is a fear of mortality. Whether that comes from having lost quite a few relatives fairly young. My father, died rather unexpectedly when I was in my 20s. And I've always lived like tomorrow's the last day, but I kind of catalogue and capture people. In North Africa, they would describe this as stealing the soul. In various communities, you can't take photographs because they think you're stealing their soul. And in a way, I think there's something about photography that does that. For me, it's a way of dealing with grief often, and I keep something that then, in the case of my father, was an image of him that I would have forever, even though he was gone. And that's what I'm convinced got me into the School of the Art Institute. Obviously, graduate school, very expensive over here. I wouldn't have thought of coming cost-wise if it weren't for the fact my father actually died and left some money to make that possible. But also, therefore, my dad, who was always a little confused by my artwork, he used to say, "Explain this to me, Michael." He, in essence, endorsed my graduate education, So it's a crazy story. But yeah, chew on that one.
I think it helps us understand a lot more. Please excuse the construction. It seems as if they started at night, right outside the studio on the stairway. So sorry about that.
What we'll do. I'm not a wizard employee. We will do the John Cage thing, and we will listen to the builder's drill, and we'll enjoy it, rather than think it's a problem. Yeah.
Yes. It's part of live radio. We love it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I think that it seems as if what drew me to as I studied your photographs is that you do capture the soul, because they're very moving. You capture the spirit of. So I think that what in your photo that I think you did capture the spirit, at least at the very least, the spirit of your grief was encapsulated in that, and it just shone through. But however, it seems as if you were able to you are able to find that spirit when you do your photographs. Can you give us a little insight about how you find it? Because it shows very clear. I've gone through a lot of them, not all of them, because you have so much on your website, but every one of them are so special because I see that spark of spirit in the person whom you capture, even in the art prints, not only in the photographs, in the art as well.
Well, I'm very honored to hear you say that, and it means an awful lot to me. Yeah, I think I'm kind of an annoying person. Most people would tell you, I don't know, I like to goad people into reaction. The worst thing for me is indifference. I'm a bit of a Marmite man. Some people like me, some people don't like me. I sometimes go out of my way to annoy and goad people. I think it's a thing actually photographers do as a matter of course, because they want something from the subject. They want to provoke, they want a reaction. They don't want just stasis, So for anybody to be indifferent to me is almost unbearable for me. If they don't like me, I don't really care. If they like me, of course, sometimes I take that for granted. But it's a beautiful thing. But I love almost all people. There's like maybe 2 people I don't like on the planet. I'm always up for working with people that I don't politically agree with, of which there are too many in the US, and I'm very outspoken on that. I have absolutely no qualms about naming names and not pussyfooting around about what politicians I despise, of which there are several in the previous administration. Yeah, I like people to give me everything they've got, or I like for them to find out what they've got that no one's ever told them they've got. Like, okay, there's something about the shape of your face or your nose or your ears. And my kids are quite, they can talk about my physical attributes, or my daughter the other night just pulled my pants up at dinner time. She just hiked them up for me. Obviously, she wasn't satisfied with the way they were hanging on my waist, you know. So I'm a bit the same. I've got a visual memory that associates faces. For example, if I look at your face, I might make a connection with some actress or someone, and it's kind of strange. It's a bit like words. Words pop into my head that I don't even know, and I seem to know them. I'm not always right, but often I'm close to being right about what the word means without a great deal of academic analysis. So it's a bit like that with music and things. Especially with jazz, you know, jazz musicians hear back what they played and they might have thought they weren't that good. And then they listen back and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm so much smarter than I thought. And one of my things is wanting people who don't realize that about themselves to know how amazing they are and what potential they've got, and not to be cowed by obviously brilliant people, of which there are many around in Chicago, because everybody is brilliant, you know.
It seems as if your fascination with words, it seems as if you're also fascinated by the spirit of the word as well, as you are fascinated with the spirit of the person. Might that be the case?
Well, yeah, words, I like to have fun with words. And sometimes I get a bit carried away. I've had editors who, you know, I do like, if I'm using like P words, for example, pathetic, parading, you know, postulary, which is a word I don't even know what it means. But, you know, the P words are kind of a little contemptuous, and it can be comedic, the way you put them together. And often it's looked upon as being a little cheesy or weird by various editors, depending how sober they are. But I like to have fun with words, you know, and I think that goes back to my childhood, where I make these goofy poems up and, you know, make terrible power rhymes that really are slightly agonizing, but to me are just hilarious, you know.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you. So your poems rhyme. You made them rhyme for you. You did the rhyming words. I mean the rhyming poems.
I do like to rhyme, but it's not. Of course, I always think that's a little, you know, perhaps a lesser calling. You know, one shouldn't rhyme. There's a great poet my English teacher at school introduced me to, called William McGonagall, who is like known as one of the worst poets of history. I think he's a Scotsman, and they were all like hideous rhymes, and, you know, an example of how really trying to cram a rhyme in that it's not supposed to go in this whole is revolting. But I kind of love bad things as well as good things. I've always been as fascinated by lowbrow as highbrow.
Well, it's you learn more when you juxtapose both of them. So it's perfectly. It's very well, very good that you notice the lowbrow as well, and you study it. I think that maybe that's what makes your work so fascinating. Well, first let me ask you this question before I forget. When you said that you study people's faces and kind of associate them with different things, etc. Do you ever find that when one person resembles another person, even though they are unrelated, that their personalities are kind of the same?
Well, you've got to kind of watch for that, but you know, otherwise we go back to Nazism and you know, using phrenological kind of comparisons and stuff. I'm often wrong in my appraisals of people. I think it's another thing with being a photographer. You kind of sniff people out really quickly, and you want to know what they're shy about or what they're guarded about, you know, and get underneath that. But you know, obviously, don't judge a book by its cover. Be careful, because you know, some person who may come across as being hard and unpleasant may turn out to be beautiful and sensitive, and vice versa. So I always try and you know, beware of being too surface.
Awesome. And so you peel away the layers then to discover the person, and in the way that you speak with them, and to like you said, provoke them, and then discover the layers.
Well, you try. You haven't got a lot of time. You don't have a lot of time. So that's why I think I push people, because I want to get stuff out of them real quick to find out whether I can make a judgment on whether I like them or not. I kind of have this, I'm not very analytical, but I have this kind of brag that I'm intuitive, and I kind of trust my intuition, not 100%, but, you know, I kind of decide whether someone's cool or not. And sometimes I'm wrong. I'll try and do it rather quickly. Therefore, I kind of get under their fingernails to find out quickly what bugs them about me, and then make my adjustments. It's an annoying trait.
Well, earlier when we were listening to Stepping Stones, and you mentioned daughter Elfie. Is that your daughter, Elfie?
That's my daughter. She's absolutely brilliant. It's not nothing to do with me. She, well, a little bit, one hopes, but you know, her mom was also, you know, but of course they're different species. They've been put in a melting pot. She's really a kind of natural musician. I'd already recorded that track. This is another example of the pandemic kind of being, you know, helping your creativity. And she was sitting on my knee listening to the track, and she started singing along. And you can't tell a teenager what to do. So if I'd said, right, well, let's sing on the track, she would say, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. But I kind of like wrote some lyrics for her and had her record it in the dining room on the top, having already recorded, as I say, the melody with the musicians quite some time earlier. I think it's beautiful, actually. We did a video recently in the UK in the snow, and we need to work on it. And, you know, maybe that will help you understand what it's supposed to be about, which is kind of about, in a way, my mother and, you know, her escape into the Yorkshire moors and beautiful country there to reflect on things that were happening in her life. And there's a specific location in Bolton Abbey. There's some beautiful stepping stones, and that's where we shot the video back in November. Yeah.
And I guess you shot the video because do you do photography, or do you also do video?
No, I actually, when I was at the Art Institute, I was a film snob. I did 16mm film. I did a film project I never finished. A lot of things that I've started I haven't finished. But I was really snooty about video also, because it was cheaper and you could just let it roll. I felt that, you know, it wasn't very concise and succinct, and so I wasn't too jazzed about video. I've taken videos, but I was always into film. So I got a guy to do it because I was in it, which is a bit embarrassing, actually. I'm not sure I can stand to see myself in it, but I played saxophone with my daughter, and it's very much a pas de deux between us, so it seemed relevant.
When you were at the Art Institute, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, what were the subjects? Did you learn any journalism over there, or where did you learn journalism?
Well, I didn't learn journalism. I don't think, this would be slightly controversial, but I don't think necessarily it's a subject that needs I should hesitate. I just, it's never been something. Writing has been probably the easiest thing I do. I find it just rolls out, you know. So studying it, of course, you can study anything, but some of the more learned journalists I've worked with, I've found somewhat tedious, and they have a way of dissecting things that is very methodical and not always very soulful. So I didn't study there. No, I studied printmaking was my major, and I was in the film department a lot of the time at the Art Institute. But I had absolutely wonderful time there. I studied, you know, all aspects of printmaking: lithography, etching, woodcut, screen printing. You know, printmaking is very much very important to my art making procedure. I did painting there, but the graphic arts, again, correlation a bit with jazz there, where there's this preparation. You know, I mean, a lot of jazz musicians spend hours studying and practicing and then hopefully let it all go. With printmaking, you really have to structure what you're going to do, your idea, and there's technical barriers. You know, with lithography, you know, you've got a huge piece of limestone. You can't kind of fuck it up. Sorry for the bad language. You know, you've got to treat it with chemistry and, you know, prepare it and prepare the paper and all this. And there's a lot. Keep everything clean. It's a bit like, I don't know, it's kind of scientific. It's very strategic.
Because it seems as if your attention to detail, let's say your attention to detail in the journalism and your attention to detail in printmaking, both of them could help the other. So which came first? Did you work as a journalist in the listing service, or did you go to the school of the Art Institute of Chicago first?
Well, I did everything all at once. I was early on fascinated by printmaking. You know, particularly I was doing posters for bands and reproducing things, and I enjoyed the way you could manipulate, you know, one version. So a lot of times my prints ended up, even if it might be an edition of 50, they'd be like monoprints, because I would treat each one differently. I had a masking technique under the screen I used to use, and this, that, and the other. In lithography, I would start kind of scumming up the plate, so I'll get some mid-tones and things and interesting effects. I've lost the question now. Something about journalism as well.
Yes, yes.
That really just, you know, journalism much more workmanlike. You get a deadline. This is what you're supposed to write about. Boom. You gotta get it in on time. That's really important. The word count. I've been somewhat notorious for blowing over word counts and had some success with getting more words printed than was intended by generous, indulgent editors. I remember I had a lovely editor, Miriam D'Annunzio at the Sun Times, who, you know, would say, this is how much space we've got, but end up running a lot more. Hopefully because she liked what I wrote, but sometimes that was about obscure music that was not necessarily the purview or the ideal nourishment for sometimes readers, but she went with it for a while, you know. And yeah, I don't know if that answers what your question, which was quite sophisticated. It was about detail, attention to detail. That's the thing, you know. I do. I don't know. I've never been to a shrink, but I think I'm, you know, a bit what's the word? Obsessive compulsive a little bit. Again, these things are all on a sliding scale, aren't they? I mean, there are some people who are obsessively compulsive on a much more impressive level than you are. You know, you think, oh, I'm OCD, I'm really, and then someone else has got a much finer, granular level of detail fascination, and you're like, oh man, I'm just an amateur OCD type.
So when you got your, we have a lot of journalism students at Northeastern Illinois University where WZRD Chicago is located. So could you give us a little how?
Apologies to them for my previous comments.
Oh, no, no, no. Just how did you get your first job? You said that it came really naturally easy, but I think it's because you're so talented and you love the writing. But how did you get your first job? Was that the listing job? Was the listing service? Was that your first journalism job?
Well, actually, I think my first published piece was for a magazine called Soul Underground. And it was very fortunate. I got a double page spread in the center of the magazine, which was really nicely designed. It was actually a connection through an illustrator friend of mine. His sister had a connection with the editor. And I had a drawing of Poncho Sanchez, the conga player, on one side of the thing in the center spread. And then I wrote a review of his performance at Dingwall's. And I postulated that the trumpet solo, who I recently met the trumpeter, he plays at the Tower of Power horn section, actually, Sal Cracchiola, I think he's called. And I said that his solos were steroid induced. And my editor says he changed it to close to perfection. And I was like, well, close to perfection is a non-statement. And he said, well, you can't say steroid induced because it's libelous. And I said, well, yeah, but I don't mean he took steroids. Well, you can't say that. That was my first lesson in journalism. And he said to me also, rather prophetically, you are your own worst enemy. And he never gave me another job. But that was my first one. And it was really great. But I was a bit of a spoiled brat and didn't understand that the editor is all powerful and you have to be nice to him.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, at first you didn't understand the constraints, but you had the powerful images and the powerful words that captured the editor's attention in the first place.
Well, I was very lucky. The first piece also I did for a magazine called Jazz on CD was the cover story. And I then went on to do a piece that got a bit of attention. It was another cover story about Jimmy Smith, who not so many people know about now, but he was a legendary Hammond organ player and a very pugnacious character, off the charts. And when I first came to Chicago, actually, I was assigned to interview him at the Jazz Buffet on Diversey, which I don't think lasted very long. Anyway, I went up there and we had a feisty interview, which my then editor publisher of that magazine described as gonzo. I didn't really realize at the time what gonzo meant, but I do now. And I put myself in the story, which I don't really think I did, especially. I think it was more that Jimmy was such an expressionistic character, freewheeling. I would later do a piece for Downbeat on him, which he threatened to shoot me, actually, or he said if he was Miles Davis, he would shoot me. Yeah, long story. But I remember my editor at the time saying to me at the Royal Festival Hall in an elevator, and he said, I discovered you. And I was like, oh, was I kind of worth discovering? And he's like, yeah, it's like a piece of primordial slime kind of crawling up the beach.
Well,
A bit backhanded.
Well, anyway, I guess the gist of your advice is that what helped you the most was networking, and also your love for what you're doing, and also your talent.
Well, you're really kind. I think I would say to people, we're all driven, you could say, by the creator or whatever, to do things. And a lot of the things I've been driven towards doing have not been especially remunerative and perhaps wise at the time. But and this is something that happens, if you're in a relationship, you know, you have to compromise over time, and there are various compromises that are made. And I was divorced a couple of years ago, and it was a very painful process, but it was somewhat of a rebirth in terms of me really taking a hard look at myself and what I stand for, and re-entrenching in some ways in saying, yeah, these are the things that I believe in, and I still believe in them really strongly, and that's what I stand for. And there are certain things that I stand for, and I don't budge on it, you know.
In other words, you did a reassessment of yourself. You stood back and reassessed yourself and decided what was you and what was important to you.
Sorry, I missed that. The drill was in the background.
I said,
The Kango hammer.
in other words, you step back and reassess yourself. You found out, you discovered what was important to you and what mattered to you.
Absolutely, and you know, there's always regrets, you know, and confusions, and you know, in journalism and artwork and music, they're some of the most rewarding intellectually pursuits, but they are not reliably paid necessarily, or they're, in terms of journalism, you have to do a lot to make a little, which is part of the reason I doubled up. And you know, very often I'm actually very excited at the moment because I have somewhat of a benchmark in my journalistic career coming up in May. I'll have the cover photograph and cover story for Downbeat magazine, which is the greatest, you know, the most famous jazz jazz magazine. Historically, it's 80 years old. It's based in Elmhurst, and it's kind of notorious. And also the subject in question, a wonderful piano player called Danilo Perez, he's a visionary guy. I went to Panama a couple of weeks ago, really wanting to escape the winter and not wanting to work terribly hard. Got down there. The pandemic had wiped out the schedule. In fact, the musician in question was in quarantine, but asked me to stay a couple more days down there, and we took some wild photos in the Bio Museum and other locations with some folkloric musicians. We had an absolute blast, and I'm thrilled to say that it will be the cover story and feature on the May Downbeat, and I'm very proud and excited about that. You know, I've had cover stories with text before, but not in that publication, and I've also had you know, photos, but you know, not so much the combination, you know, about a subject that I really believe in, you know.
Congratulations, the cover story. That's wonderful. We'll look out for that in May. Let me write that down. We'll look out for that.
Buy a copy, yes. Buy a copy, because a bit like CDs and stuff, I made a CD, and I made it with I'm going to get you a copy. It's got a booklet inside, so it tells you all about the musicians, because there are a lot of amazing musicians on there. And, you know, all these streamers, I won't mention names, but they don't, you know, the younger generation don't tend to know who they're listening to. Certainly they don't know who composed the tune and who the, you know, the piano player is on it or anything. So it's scrupulously laid out in a booklet in my CD. And I find the thing, therefore, worth buying. And that's, even if you haven't got a machine, I can send you the digital version, but you've got to buy this. I'm going to put it up there, look. I've got to buy this CD. And I mean, I know we got an island of plastic in the Pacific, and it's politically incorrect. But for me as an art maker, a thing maker, I had to make a thing. And, you know, getting back to the magazines and things, periodicals, incredibly, these periodicals have survived. I mean, the Chicago Reader I've worked on for years is still going. Even the Sun-Times is limping along, I think. I mean, a lot of that work has been wiped out in my lifetime. But there's still, people still want a brochure form thing. And I would just say that that's a means of funding photographers, journalists, editors, all manner of people, by supporting that, by actually getting your hand in your wallet and getting $6 out, you know.
Yes, and this is something that the buyer will enjoy again and again too.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah.
Well, I really, really enjoyed those songs that you sent.
Oh, fabulous. They're great, aren't they?
Yes,
Aren't they?
they are.
Did you play Blue Stew?
I played all three of them. First, I played
With
yes.
Marvin Tate? You've had Marvin Tate on the show, haven't you, I think?
Oh,
You had my friend Marvin Tate on the show before. He's a...
not yet. Let's.
Oh, I thought you had him on there. He had a... Maybe it wasn't you. He's a visual artist and amazing visual artist, and also a performer and a poet. And that was a pandemic thing, you know, had this track that I loved, but I was like, it's a bit long for the average person who isn't interested in jazz solos. I'm like, what can we put in there? So I had Marvin come over and kind of freestyle over the top. We had some whiskey and he just, yeah, I mean, it's, for me, it's the kind of thing that I love to listen to, that kind of thing. Which I've got, you know, obviously Micaiah slamming on the background. I've got Javia Armstrong, who's coming to town, amazing percussionist. She's doing something at Elastic this week for her PhD thesis. She's on there. Andrew Zelm, who plays with the Lowdown Brass Band. Rick Gerenbach, who's a producer and plays with Poor Dog Ponderings, on there. So many cool cats, man. It's really, I mean, I'm not actually a braggadocio type of dude, really, or formally. But now, of course, there's not so much salt left in the hourglass. So I don't have time to be bashful. And I love that record. And I think it's fantastic. And yeah, all the tracks are killing. I mean, there's some of my heroes on there. And I really, as much as brag about it myself, it's about, of course, the community collective involvement. And honestly, I mean, these guys, they had no rehearsal. They went in and read the stuff down, but they don't play it. No, they didn't know what they were doing. Some of them don't even remember, you know, Micaiah barely remembers doing those tracks, you know, because it was in and out, and they never dialed it in though. So they're all flame on, you know, they just, I think you can hear that everybody's just giving it what Chicago musicians do, you know, everything they've got, super professional, incredible.
Where was it? Where was it recorded?
It was recorded at the legendary CRC downtown, where my namesake, I think, funnily enough, the day I recorded it, I think the first session, one of the studios was taped off for doing work on Michael Jackson. Oh no, they'd previously done work on Michael Jackson's history, I think, some post work. And there was a musician called James Brown in the other studio, no relation. And I would like to mention that the engineer on the record is the fabulous Freddie Brightberg, who worked with Curtis Mayfield at Curtom for, I think, 7 years or, you know, 5 years or something. And all the music I hear that I dig, he's done stuff with Coco Taylor, with Natalie Cole and Professor Longhair and stuff. You know, that's the reason it sounds so awesome, because you can hear all the instruments and you can hear all the nuances of the instruments. And that's down to Freddie. So I'm hoping to work with him again on another one soon.
Yes, absolutely. And let us know when the next one comes out as well, because this is very interesting.
I was going to record over just before Christmas, and then everybody got COVID, and we had to scrap the whole thing, you know. So with my band from the Magic Lounge, well, I have to mention the Chicago Magic Lounge. I'm playing there next Monday for Valentine's night with a fabulous drummer called Ernie Adams. I played there last Monday with the incredible Thaddeus Tukes, a brilliant young vibraphone player. with my band, which includes a fabulous bass player called Mark Songston, super strong, and a multi-instrumentalist friend of mine who's a dancer, plays trumpet, guitar, snare drum, you name it, sings also. Sophia Sanchez, that's my group. I call it Mike's Magic Band. We're actually also playing this Saturday in a quintet at Nick's Beer Garden for the first time, with Avriel Ra on drums and Dee Bain on keys. And please come along 9 to 12 this Saturday at Nick's Beer Garden on Milwaukee. And then on Monday at the Chicago Magic Lounge, which is a legendary speakeasy. It's really one of the most fun places for a night out. I work with some amazing magicians. We play 2 sets of jazz while 4 or 5 magicians do their incredible stuff. And then there's a stage show and bar magic afterwards. And it's one of the best nights out in Chicago.
Wow.
5050 North Clark.
5050 North Clark. Okay.
I'm advertising, yes. Look.
Yes.
I'm unscrupulous, aren't I?
It's fine. That's fine. I think our viewers would, our listeners would definitely appreciate that. So 5050 North Clark, is that in Andersonville?
That's the Magic Lounge. You won't notice it's got a washing machine sign up. It's a speakeasy. You go in, it's super fun, and you go behind these tumble dryers, and there's this incredible theater in there. And it's still kind of quite underground. It's super popular. But what I absolutely love about it is that it's not really a jazz audience. They come for the unexpected, which is kind of magic. And, you know, the response is really like nothing else. I made so many friends playing there. And some of the musicians in the bar afterwards, there's great craft cocktails, are geniuses. I mean, they're like, you know, and they're a little bit, well, they're even cleverer than jazz magicians, because they, you know, think about it. They have to prepare, they have to be the smartest guy in the room, you know. I don't actually like being the smartest guy in the room. I talk too much, as you're noticing, but I think it's a bit odious to be the smartest person in the room. And I'm not actually as smart as I seem to appear. I'm quite stupid, really. But so it's great working with these magicians who are like, they're always twice as smart as you are, you know, because they're like, yeah, they're an interesting group, you know.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever write an article about the Magic Lounge?
Well, I was hoping to do so for the Chicago Reader. They've got their Best of Chicago thing coming up, but the Magic Lounge has already been nominated under a couple of categories. One is Best Foyer, and the other one is Best Foyer Entertainment, I think, and Best Magic Place. I have done some others that hopefully will be included in that reader piece, but I would love to have written about some of the characters that perform there, because they're really rarefied, you know, magicians. They're interesting crew, you know.
Do the musicians, I mean, the magicians that play there, do they travel around the country, or are they mostly Chicagoans and mostly there?
They do travel. In fact, Paige Thompson has just been on Fool Me with Penn and Teller. My boss there, Ben Barnes, is currently, I think, at the Magic Castle in Los Angeles. A lot of the cats go over there as being one of the centers of excellence for magic. Never visited, but I must do next time. And Paige was on the Jersey Shore a couple of summers ago doing magic on there. And Louis Gary, on her husband, also been out. Sorry, husband. Dear, oh dear, I think they're dating. Yeah, take that off the air. But they're lovers anyway. They're magicians, and they won't be embarrassed about that. And they work together or support each other and travel. I mean, honestly, some of these names, Jonathan Cam, who lives in St. Charles with his mom, he's just brilliant with his hands. You know, he makes all kinds of woodwork projects for himself and makes his mom's life easier by constructing things that help her, you know, a little step in the garage or whatever, you know. But he's got an amazing hands, man, and it comes across in some of the skills he can do, vanishing coins and things, you know.
Well, that's a skill that does come in handy if he's going to help his mom with shortcuts around the housework. So that he sees stuff that at least he could make the dirty stuff disappear faster.
Yes. Well, I wish someone could help me do that. As you see in the background here, tidiness is, yeah, that gave me the slip early on. But then I heard Einstein was filthy. Miles Davis was terribly disorganized. And yet, you know, so I use those guys as my, you know, holy grail.
When you studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, you won the James Nelson Raymond Phillips Prize. So what happened that you won the prize, and what did you use the prize for?
Well, that was lovely. It was a prize that was cash, which is nice because sometimes you get these prizes and you get a, you know, a plastic something with your name on it, and it, you know, it's nice to have on the shelf, but that was cash, which was nice. Yeah. And I think I wasn't even going to bother applying for that. It was the night before. Often things happen like that with me. It's 3 in the morning and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to bed. I'm not going to do that. More often than not, I stay up and I go for it. And in that question, in that particular application, it was slides. They don't really use slides anymore, like transparencies. And it was paintings, really. I was a printmaker, but I did some obsessive text paintings when I was at the Art Institute, and they were all a bit ironic and smart ass. One of them was a large dartboard, and it didn't have any numbers on it. It just had 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And I think in the middle it says BS. So instead of bullseye, it's kind of bullshit. Well, the point being, you know, that in life we all try and hit, you know, what do they say in England? 180, you know, it's the treble, blah, blah, the treble 80 or whatever that gives you the maximum points. More than a bullseye, I think, actually. I just thought everybody's trying to be this thing, and sometimes it doesn't happen. And so life is unpredictable, and that's what that piece was about. And some of the others were kind of riddles, you know, plays on word, but they were ultimately quite serious philosophical investigations. I've always been interested in philosophy and the working of the mind and what we do things for and why, you know. And art school was a fun place to investigate some of those unfathomables.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any art mentors?
Well, my art mentors, I don't know. I always kind of went my own way, really. I remember having an art teacher at school who was a fabulous guy, actually, called Mike Robson. Yeah, when back in England, and I was a bit embarrassed that I was doing things about jazz at the time. I did a big piece of Charlie Parker made out of all his influences, and I always felt that was a bit, because I was playing the saxophone at the time, a little bit obvious. And he just said, go for what you know. Someone earlier had said, or later said, oh, it's like young girls drawing horses doing that. So I'm like, oh, okay, what else? But at the Art Institute, I lived with Doug Houston when I first arrived, who's a great character. I've kind of lost touch with him. He does some amazing artwork, very funny, but it kind of touches on quintessential Americana. He did a lot of work about Elvis, and Elvis is the Mona Lisa and stuff like this. More interesting, actually, than it appears on the surface. And then I TA'd with a wonderful etcher and lithographer called Phil Chen, who teaches in Iowa now at a school there. But he was really a fabulous storyteller and does some beautiful artwork. And Janine Coop Riding is I think I TA'd in her etching class, but she's a great woodcut and relief artist. And, you know, very intelligent, wonderful lady. So there's 3 for you.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So that, okay, so that mostly helped you with your printmaking then?
Yes, printmaking. I taught a lot. I taught all over. I taught in Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. I taught Evanston Art Center for many, many years. I taught at the Chicago Printmakers Collaborative. Deb Lade is a great friend of mine there. I taught at the North Shore Art League up in Winnetka. So for a while, when the kids were young, I was running around, you know, logging silk screens, dripping with water from one place to the other. Yeah, it's a lot of effort, and you know, again, not terribly well paid by the time you finish getting, you know, speeding tickets for buzzing up to Milwaukee at 5 in the morning and stuff.
So you were teaching, and then how did you still find time to create if you did so much teaching?
Well, what I do when I went to go to Milwaukee, I would get up at 5. I had to start teaching at 8, and I would teach all day, and then I would stay really late in the studio and do some work there in the photo lab, or you know, preparing, because a lot of the printmaking has a photographic element. I would sometimes, you know, be in the dark room. Again, a lot of this stuff has changed now. The big copy camera they used to have at the Art Institute, I'd always be in the dark room looking film for prints, for screen prints and stuff. Yeah, and I'd avoid the rush hour traffic on the way back then, you see, and I'd do some work. When I was in London, I used to rent a space at various workshops. There's a great place called the London Print Workshop where I did a lot of stuff. And I would have one day, I'd go in the office a couple of days a week, and then I'd go to the print workshop, and then I'd have gigs around town. You know, I'd kind of juggle all this stuff. I was actually a model at the time. Being a gorgeous looking man, of course, you won't find that surprising. But I used to work for the Ugly modeling agency in London, which is a legendary place for old prize fighters and nut jobs. Anyway, yeah, so I did a few fun videos and shoots for them in the meantime. Yeah.
Are there certain themes to which you gravitate in your art? And if so, what are these themes?
Oh, the themes? Well, I would say themes are, you know, unfortunately, irony and irreverence, which are slightly annoying British traits, but there is an undercurrent of seriousness in trying to find out what the purpose of life is and all that. So meditations on that. I had the series that I was doing of Henry VIII. It was a lithograph, and I decapitated him. And then I put various people's heads on his head, not really in a flurry of activity as it became relevant. So I put Mayor Daley, Richard M. Daley's head on there. I put O.J. Simpson's head on there. In fact, that piece is in a show at the moment, a great Black History Month initiative by Michael Ramsden. It's currently at a gallery called the Gallery of at 747 Southwestern Avenue, behind the Muse coffee shop. And it's a great show of like 200 pieces, a lot of Black artists. All the subjects are you know, great Black performers and, you know, philanthropists and geniuses. And it's up for the rest of this month. And we had an opening last Thursday, and we have another one this Thursday with a singer. The following Thursday, there's a Sidney Poitier movie. And then, you know, it's really great. And people talk about Black history and yeah, anyway, my O.J. Simpson Henry VIII piece is there, and it's a little controversial. It plays on, you know, it just seemed to fit because O.J. obviously the football player, so he's got all the padding which Henry VIII has in this Holbein original, which I took off, and then there's a glove in his hand. Obviously, there's a dagger in his hand, and of course, well, we're pretty sure he killed his wife. And Henry VIII killed 6 of them. Well, not all 6 of them, but several of them. Anyway, so Henry VIII was a theme. And just to let you know, because you asked if I had a theme, that's one of them. And Donald Trump, I would like to put in Henry VIII's garb too. And you could probably figure out the reasons for that. There are several, and he's a candidate. But I won't have a head. He'll just have a flying orange wig. I would love to do that. What was great about graduate school is that I didn't have to worry about life and earning money and paying the gas bill. And you know, that's why I recommend education to anybody. Of course, you have to spend the rest of your life after school paying for it. So you can do it on your own. But I'm hoping I will finish that piece and continue the series, this historical series. Another project of mine, I'm going to shut up because I'm talking too much.
No. Tell us about your other project and maybe another theme that you like to use.
Oh, well, one of my themes, I've got this series of identical twins next to famous monuments all over the world. I've shot in Berlin, in Rome, in Brazil, in Russia, in Iceland, wherever I'm usually on a job doing something else or I'm traveling to somewhere, I'll always stop off. I went to a wedding in Hamburg, I stopped in Poland and Stockholm, and I did twin shoots. So I've just been to Panama. I got a couple of twin shoots in, and it's really dear to my heart, this project. It's quite ambitious. I would like it to be in a museum because it's not a money maker. It's going to cost money because I want to do them large scale. So if you know anyone who's some philanthropist who wants to help me out, it's really a fun project, and everybody who, you know, gets wind of it really quite enjoys it because everybody knows a set of twins. And it's not really anything you put your finger on what it's about. To me, it's about symmetry relating to the architecture and obviously the symmetry of twins, and the fact that in a swath of drone-like people at a tourist attraction, you get these two identical people, and it's suddenly like, oh, there is a God.
When you photograph identical twins, do you find a difference between them somehow, and then you try to photograph that?
Well, that's a very interesting question, of many interesting questions you've posed. I often find that one twin is quite different temperamentally to the other. So one of them is really into it, and the other one is as vociferously not into it. And so, yeah, it's really fascinating. You get different types of twins. The twins I just shot in Panama were fraternal twins, apparently, but they looked identical. Probably the most identical pair I've ever shot. Then there are mirror twins who have, you know, one will have a toothache here and the other one has a toothache on the other side of their mouth. You know, they're interesting. But it's not really a big twin survey, super scientific thing. It's really kind of kitsch and supposed to be just a visual feast. And, you know, they're photographic, but I would love to be able to combine them as screen prints and screen print them and make them huge. But it's just so expensive to do now. And, you know, again, it's such a specific thing. It's not a commercial thing. But it's one of maybe 3. Well, one of them was getting my record out. I had on my wish list, my to-do list. The other one, I want to write a series of volumes of jazz, about jazz musicians I've interviewed over the years, and also photographs Photographs and text, which is not often, they're usually mutually exclusive in coffee table books. That's going to be in a set of 12 volumes, most of which will be published posthumously by my kids, who will be ordered to do so in my will. But that and the Twins series are all very much on my to-do list of.
I did see one of your photographs of the twins. I think it was the blonde twins in the pink outfit. I forgot where they were, but I do remember the twins.
Oh, which one? Oh, the pink. Yeah, you know what? I have put hardly any of them up. Hardly anybody's seen the project, because the thing with photographs, I kind of feel once you've seen it, you know, I just received a beautiful piece of artwork from a famous musician the other day. It was one of the most beautiful gifts I've ever received. And I was wanting to brag about it on social media. And I wasn't sure that he would want that. And sure enough, and he's put it beautifully, and he said, "That's for you, Michael. It's for you. It's not for you to show to everybody else." In the case of the twins, it's not really like that. I just don't want everybody to see them all and then be like, "Oh, we've seen those." I want them to come down to an exhibition and see them in the flesh and be wowed, you know. And if you do it all on social media, it just dies a death as soon as you put it up. So I'm quite secretive about some of my special projects. I'm like, they're rather jealously guarded. So there's only a couple on my Facebook page. There's a lot of cool shots that you are not on there, you know.
I think I found the twins were in the pink outfit on your website. I think it was on the website.
I think that's the only one that's up there. Yeah. The ones next to the oh, those guys are gorgeous. They're Russian, actually. Russian twins. And again, they don't have to be relevant to the location. So when I was in Tokyo shooting under the Tokyo Tower, it was two gals from Rhode Island. You know, they don't have to be Japanese. It's not like a touristy kind of postcard thing. It's more aleatoric kind of happenstance related.
This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at Wizard via Zoom, Michael Jackson, print artist and journalist and interdisciplinary artist. Michael, when you wrote so many stories about jazz artists, what was your most memorable story and why?
Well, I did mention to you the one about Jimmy Smith, but over the years, so many. Yeah, I mean, each one is a labor of love. You know, sometimes I'm asked by an editor to go out and do it. Very often I'm pitching stuff about artists that I love. And they're across the spectrum, really. I'm not one of these people which many musicians are, they're divided between the avant-garde free players and the bebop traditional mainstream players, which there is a division of always. For me, I've always loved all types of music, from world music to the blues, and also I've loved texture and sound-based music making just as much as you know, traditional forms. So I've interviewed, you know, Fred Hirsch, a beautiful piano player, who's very classically influenced. He's got a great new album out, actually, beautiful new album. For me, his playing is so much about touch. I come from a family of piano players. My mother's a piano player. Her significant other is a wonderful jazz player who's also an author and experimental music, electronic music specialist back in the day. So I love piano players. I think if there was one person I would like to interview, you know, before I call it quits, Keith Jarrett, who's had several strokes, and I would still love to talk to him. He's a rather cantankerous and somewhat difficult person. I've always sought out those people who are difficult to interview just because, I don't know, I like a challenge. That would include people like, well, one year I was at the Montreal Jazz Festival and I wanted to interview Abdullah Ibrahim from South Africa and Ginger Baker, who is famous for clobbering journalists with golf clubs. You know, I didn't get either of them that time because they were, you know, being difficult or not well. Archie Shepp, I did interview on that, or maybe not that occasion, but prior. Very interesting. Wadada Leo Smith is a very original artist who, you know, does graphic scores and things, and was Pulitzer nominated last year or the year before. Wayne Shorter, I interviewed years and years ago. Sonny Rollins, I consider a friend and have interviewed him many times over the years, and is probably my chief influence on the saxophone, you know, on the tenor saxophone anyway, on the alto. I missed a lot of those cats. Cannibal Adderley died, Art Pepper died, all these wonderful musicians. Sonny Stitt, I was going to see in the 82, I think the year he died, in Leeds, and he didn't make it. I did see Eddie Lockjaw Davis. I think my mom's boyfriend might even be playing with him that night, which is something. And I'm boring you now, aren't I?
No, I did want to ask you, did you, how did you come to choose the saxophone as your instrument?
Well, I started out on guitar and I was kind of useless. I was in a group of accomplished guitarists, and I was out of my depth, and that didn't last very long. But I found the saxophone shiny and sexy, and in those days, back in the Wens, you used to have saxophone solos on things, you know. And I always thought, wow, that's so cool to sound, you know. So luckily I had a mom who was, well, she's not a tiger mom. She's quite laid back, but she's obviously, you know, a music teacher and very appreciative of the importance of music education. So she got me this $30 alto from an old guy down on the riverside in my hometown in Yorkshire, and it stank of, he was a chain smoker, this guy. It was kind of green inside, the mouthpiece was green, and it was a piece of work. But I played it for years. I even when I was, oh, sorry.
How did you clean it up before playing it?
Oh,
it was so very.
Well, I don't think I did clean it up for a long time. Cleaning in the saxophone is an interesting one because this reed on there needs to keep moist. And saxophone players will tell you get a good reed and you've got the right layer of moisture under there. Actually, I posted on Facebook during the pandemic a picture of a reed that I'd had for like 18 months on my saxophone, and I picked the horn up after not playing because everyone was too depressed to do anything during lockdown. And there it was still on, it played fine. But when I took it off to wash the mouthpiece, it was fabulously moldy and disgusting. And I posted it just to make everyone throw up.
So I guess there are some solutions that are specific to wiping a saxophone down there.
Well, I'll tell you, I learned something from another place that I visit a lot and need to mention is PM Woodwind in Evanston. Paul Maslan there is a fabulous repairer, but he's a real philanthropist, and he has these incredible workshops with world-class saxophone players. The next one coming up is with an amazing young man called Adam Larson. He's doing a masterclass on February the 19th on Saturday. He'll be playing at the Green Mill. He's got a new record out, fantastic record. And one of the guys, a bunch of saxophone players work there. So, you know, you ask them questions. And I went the other day to get a pull through, which pulls use a quick way of cleaning some of the moisture out of your saxophone. And he's like, oh, I put it all the way through the bell. I leave the crook on and the mouthpiece, and I pull it all through. I'd been doing the mouthpiece separately, the crook separately, and he said, I'll pull it all the way through and leave the mouthpiece on. And that was a revelation to me. I thought, wow, that does it all in one fell swoop. So you got a little piece of cotton here, and you just pull it all the way through and out the other end.
Oh. But how were you able to first thread it though? You first put the string in and then tied the cotton and then started to pull?
Yeah, it's got a little weight on the end. So you turn the horn upside down, and the weight, the little plastic weight comes through the end, and then you just pull this bit of cloth all the way through. It's quite fun, actually.
and that was it. And it was just because, what was the solution on it? Because I am kind of interested. I work at a grocery store and I see the aisle of cleaning products.
Well, actually, I don't really use, you can use peroxide on there. I just use water, and sometimes I get a little brush, a little, what would you call it? And just scrape some of the vile, hardened saliva on the side. Why anyone would date a saxophone player, I don't know. They spend most of the time kissing a piece of metal with a soggy piece of wood attached to it. They've all got halitosis, and it's a nice, shiny, sexy thing. It makes great sounds, but you don't want to be kissing a saxophone player.
Okay. When you were at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, did you have any internships?
No, but I did teach there. I taught a print class with a friend of mine, another graduate student, a printmaker, and we taught everything from woodcut, lithography, etching, and screen printing, and it was a great experience. And I really I miss teaching. My last job was at the Evanston Art Centre, and enrollment started to decline, and I would like to get back into it, really, because teaching is really part of who I am. How much useful information I have to impart is questionable, but I'm really interested in art therapy and art making as therapy also, and also believe that everybody is a valid artist. I really believe that, and printmaking is actually a wonderful way of making people who don't think they're good at drawing amazed at what they're capable of doing through using the press and ink. And I can make the most humble doodle into a masterpiece in one of my classes. So give me a job.
When you were teaching while you were still studying there and teaching, was that as a teacher's aide, or did you actually already have a position there to teach because you knew so much about printmaking?
Well, yeah, I was really kind of a self-taught printmaker, actually. When I was in England at Brighton Art College, this was the difference between my undergraduate and my postgraduate, because in England, it was very compartmentalized. You had your graphic designers, you had your fine artists, and you had your illustrators, and never the twain shall meet. And it wasn't really encouraged fraternizing between the departments. They all had their separate budget and stuff. When I came to the Art Institute, it was totally incestuous, and each department, very interdisciplinary. People would run off into fiber, or they'd be down in the foundry making metal and objects and things. It was quite, what it does, unfortunately, is make you kind of almost vocationally inept, in that you're so multi-skilled that just tuning into the one thing is hard. A lot of my friends from graduate school there are very interdisciplinary. I've got an ex college pal who's now into ceramics. other people have gone into fabric design, having studied painting, and really is mind expanding. But I would say that is a wonderful thing about art college. The other thing that's super important for me in my other specialisms is the critical acuity you develop, because you have a panel of people come around and they attack your artwork. And the first time that happened to me with my series actually of historical pieces, what are you doing putting all these heads on top of, Henry VIII? What's that all about? And I defended it vociferously. The second time I had one, I was a little bit more measured, and I decided to listen to what they had to say, And then by the third one, it was a combination of self-defense, and by the end of it, you learn how to take and accept criticism, which is really very important lesson to learn. And also, it sharpens your sense of self,
So that was like the juries when the critics came to examine your art then, right? And were those critics like other instructors?
Yes, they're a panel of, and then there's a visiting artist. I remember on my last, and they're all jousting to say the most intelligent, penetrating thing. Also, the panel, they're all wanting to be impressive themselves. And there's always one who's nice, and there's always one who's cruel. It's a bit like, America's Got Talent with Simon Cowell or whatever. He comes in and goes, "This is rubbish," And it was hilarious. But I remember my last one, some visiting artist accused me of complete plagiarism. I think it was Mike Kelly or someone. I totally ripped off Mike Kelly apparently, and I was ignorant of this artist, and said, I don't know who you're talking about. And she was like, "Oh, come on, it's quite obvious, And I said, well, I'm going to go out of my way to avoid that artist now, But an instructor once told me, you don't want to reinvent the sewing machine. So you have to know what's out there and adjust. Otherwise, you could indeed come up with something that's already been come up with. And the thing with me has always been, I don't think I've been super competitive. I watched the Olympics and the snowboarding last night, and I'm just absolutely blown away. And I'm like, wow, this twist is like so crucial. And you're like, how many arms did you break? How many bones did you break to do that? I don't have to win the race, but I have to do my own thing. I don't want to be copying someone else's thing. Lester Young, great saxophone player and linguist and icon, famously said, you can't join the throng until you've got your own song.
And so the saxophone, that was your instrument. And then did you find that the saxophone, it was just sexy, or is there something about the tone of the saxophone that attracts you?
Well, it is one of the most incredible inventions of all time, and it hasn't really been modified that significantly. There's been low A's put on baritones and high F sharp and a few fiddly little bits, but really it's pretty much as Adolphus Sax originally invented it, and there's a lot of them. There's all kinds of ones I haven't even played, like this. Well, there's a sopranino. I think there's one above that as well. There's a bass saxophone, which is colossal. There's a contrabass saxophone, which is just ridiculous.
And what kind of saxophone do you play?
Well, I play alto, tenor, and soprano. I like to play soprano more, but I always find I leave it somewhere. If I've got three saxophones, music, all the music, I've famously lost it once. There was a piece on the news to try and get it back, actually, and it worked in the end. Yeah, I love soprano, I love alto, I love tenor. For me, there are three different horns entirely. The saxophone, tenor, I like to play ballads on. The alto is more, well, I also like to play ballads on alto, but I play them more in the kind of bebop fashion. It's more soaring, the alto, and then the soprano just calls out to you for certain things where there's a little more of an exotic flavor. I'd love to play baritone. I can't see me buying one before I die, but you know, baritone's fun too.
So all these different tones, the saxophone has to be made different to accommodate these levels. Then, like the saxophone, I mean, no, like baritone from soprano, etc., from alto.
Yeah, they're very different. I had an argument with my friend once, a great saxophone player from Germany called Jan Klar, and he plays all of them. He's phenomenal. He plays in a bass saxophone trio, I think, and he said, oh, once to me, he played a beautiful ballad once on a record on soprano, but he said, oh, I don't think the soprano is a proper instrument. And I was kind of like, well, I don't really think the baritone's a proper instrument, but I've changed my tack on that. I've heard some great baritone playing recently. A friend of mine in England's been playing a bunch on it with a lot of facility, and you know, you get these horn players who stick to a certain horn, which is very smart. You know, certain guys around town. There's a wonderful player called Greg Ward, who you may have heard of. He plays alto. He's a world-class player, great composer. And he doesn't play, you know, Von Freeman, it was tenor, got to play tenor. And but a bit like printmaking with me, I'm greedy. So I want to do everything. I want to know everything. I don't go a bundle on clarinets. I love clarinets played by other people, but I came from, my dad was a clarinet player and my uncle was also a clarinet player. And a squeak on a clarinet is not something I like to hear. Bass clarinet, I would consider playing. I don't think I've got enough time now to do that, but a lot of greats, some cats around town. Jeff Bradfield, great tenor player, who also plays lovely bass clarinet. Great bass clarinet player called who was playing last night at the Hungry Brain, who specializes in bass clarinet. Oh, come on. He's a good friend of mine. I'm going to blank on his name. Anyway, you should check him out. He's actually, well, I'm not going to mention that because who cares? I'm just let me check what his name is now. I brought him up. A really, really wonderful character. He's like 6'5" or something, and a real old school hippie. He's into the what's his name? The dude who has breathing videos, and he, before his gig last night at the Hungry Brain, he put himself in a barrel of hot water in the freezing cold outside, you know.
Oh, wow.
So he's Jason Stein. He's just a bass clarinet dude. He's decided, you know, that's how I get notorious, you see. Whereas I've always, it's tough for me just to play one horn on the gig, even though it's $5 a reed. And, you know, I'd go playing the three of them and it'd be like, you know, $15 for, you know, each horn. And then you got to fix them later. And but you take him to Paul Maslan, he got any problems because he's the guy. And Paul is a great, also patron of my photography. We have a gallery in his studio space with about 30 pictures of incredible saxophone players: Ravi Coltrane, Chris Potter. The list goes on.
Where is the show being held? Where is the show so that our listeners could go see it?
Oh, well, that's his shot. Oh, unfortunately, last night was Jason Stein at the
Oh.
Hungry Brain. Again, you've got to come to my show on Saturday at Nick's Beer Garden at 9 o'clock with a quintet. That's a must because it's our first gig there, and I need you there. And always the Magic Lounge next Monday. If you want to take that special someone out for a great night, you could do no better than the Chicago Magic Lounge. We're going to play a lot of love songs, obviously, and I'm going to wear a pink suit and pink everything, some pink accessories. I've got a pink ring I got from Panama, especially for the occasion. And yeah.
Also, I did want to ask you, where did you learn how to play the saxophone? At the Art Institute, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago?
Well, no, actually, I was one of those. I was a bit of a rebel, so I didn't do music really, or arts, especially at school. I did them kind of on my own. I did have some teachers early on. It's a whole different story. Great alto player called Bill Charleston at the Leeds College of Music. I had lessons with him, and I was in awe of him. And then I kind of figured stuff out. I'm a bit of an autodidact, so I'm a prolific purchaser of educational supplements that tell me about, people's processes. And I was in a big band when I was young. It wasn't a school thing. It was more outside of school every Saturday. And the big band did rather well. We got to the equivalent of Carnegie Hall. We went to the Royal Festival Hall when I was a kid. And yeah, I had like a big alto solo, and it was pretty amazing. So that was great. And we had some great charts. We had some hip, we weren't playing bloody Mary As the Little Lamb or any crap like that. We had some Harry South arrangements of hip TV themes, and so that was, I played with them for quite a few years and really learned an awful lot,
So you were kind of self-taught. So when also, since you are an interdisciplinary artist, and you discuss how you almost taught yourself playing the saxophone, can you give us an idea about what captivates you as a possibility for a project? I see that we see that the twins captivated you, but what is the essence of what captivates you as a possibility for a project?
Such an interesting question. Your questions are really fabulous. Well, I was talking about this with my daughter last night. As I mentioned, she's really talented, and she has, as young people do, insecurities, as I did. She's writing a song, and she was kind of like not sure whether it was any good. And of course, I listened to it. I thought it was fantastic. But I did try and say to her, putting things on the universal is sometimes a good one with art pieces where you take it away from the specific. And I remember talking about poetry and how things have happened to me that are very specific. And I've felt obliged to write a poem about it, but I can't look at it or read it because it's too wince-inducingly sincere or something or other. And it's when you are postulating on larger universal themes that don't have specifics that, more successful art is perhaps made. That may not be true, but it's a way of, with lyric content. In her case, I was saying, it doesn't matter if it doesn't make a lot of sense. Most songs, I remember listening to Elvis Costello coming up, and some of his songs on, what's that record? They're really a bunch of, tongue twisters. I'm going to speak double Dutch to a real double Duchess. New Amsterdam. It's a load of nonsense, really. It's just a confection. But given the way the bass is kicking in, the way the drums are, you can make something out of nothing. And in a way, my project, My Gal from Ochi, is not exactly how I intended it to be. It went its own way, but hopefully some people find it resonate would be too pretentious for that particular song, but hopefully they find it entertaining or something. You take it in their own direction, which is what artists often say. They don't want to tell you what it's about because they want you to own it and take it where you want it to go.
And the girl from Ochi said took on a life of herself, and that it seems as if you gave birth to it, and then it was like your baby. It took it grew, and then it grew in a way that you weren't expecting, and that's a little bit of how you go about it. Something inspires you to give birth to it, and then you work at it, but you let it grow on its own as well as you help it along.
That is very deep, and actually it's core to who I am. I think I have, on the one hand, a control freak aspect where with the details, they have to be right. Certain things, if they're not right, something slightly off, and it has no validity if that thing isn't there. On the other hand, I am on the one hand controlling, but on the other hand, I like chaos, ironically. And I like things to, like if I have a gig and I suddenly don't have a drummer or a bass player the night before, I'll give someone a call. There's so many great musicians in Chicago. Something different will happen. With music in particular, I find this with drummers as a saxophone player. I have a certain drummer who puts the beat somewhere I'm not, because I like to kind of play. I don't always play on the beat. I like to kind of bounce off what's happening. So if I get a drummer who might be great, but if he's stomping on the spot where I go, it doesn't really work, or it works but it's mediocre. Whereas if I get the drummer who feels it in another spot, it's just like sexual intercourse, really, So there's this dynamic. So I guess my point is controlling on the one hand. I have this thing with my kids where I don't really parent them. Sometimes they get a bit frustrated. I just say, well, look, you make your own decision as to whether what you just did was cool or not. Or I don't kind of hit them over the head, but well, I was all right. Sometimes a bit of that, but they always say, no, it wasn't, So I try and set them free. I'm not interested in, I want them to be adventurous and find their way, and just help them with some of the philosophical things I've thought about with relation to male and female, or female or whatever, relationships over the duration through having kids and, putting them through school and all this stuff. Should a couple stick together through thick and thin? Have they basically turned into different beings through the experience, and then go off and discover the last chapter with someone else? Or what is the way to go, and blah, blah. I don't know if I answered your question at all.
You did.
You were talking about babies. I think that you're making a baby in your artwork, and I think that related for me to my actual babies.
Yes, I could see the form of what you're saying. So it's very beautiful. Speaking of that, since you're very familiar with the jazz scene, and then how it takes on a life of itself too, how has the jazz scene changed in the years that you've covered it as a jazz reporter?
Well, it's very much changed in terms of having lost a few very important figures. When I first came to Chicago, I actually deliberately sought out von Freeman because he was an original voice. And he's kind of, in a way, one of the reasons I moved here. Also going to the Green Mill, which was just a fantastic venue. And, you know, Von for me was larger than life force. It's beyond music, really. I mean, in many ways, I was not particularly enamored of his saxophone playing in particular, or like Fred Anderson's. I was always, yeah, I wish they would, you know, this and that. It was less, what impressed me was how Chicago accepted different characters. It's a very interesting scene from that point of view, you know, with the AACM, avant-garde musicians mixing with the tough tenors and the straight headers. How it's changed, you know, some cats came under, you had the empty bottle scene there with Ken Vandermark and John Corbett and Bruno from Okadisc doing stuff for a while. Obviously Ken's still going to blazes. Then these young cats came up, some of whom I've been lucky to play with. Great bass player Jason Rudke played with me for a while. Mike Reed is very important in that scene as a thinker. And he and Josh Berman used to run the Emerging Improvisers thing at the Hungry Brain for many years. And then obviously Mike is involved with the Pitchfork Festival. He then opened Constellation, which is an amazing performance space. These are real ideas guys who have the bigger picture, and they've influenced a slew of musicians. And there are all these fabulous players in town playing at a high level, and they're extraordinary in that they keep doing it, even though, you know, not all of them have kids, but some of them do. And that tends to change your perspective. But, you know, they'll play in rooms where there aren't many people, just so they can further their art, and they'll put records out that nobody buys. You know what I mean? They travel a lot in Europe, and they've got notoriety beyond Chicago to sustain them in some ways. But it's really, really, really hard to be a musician and be creative, especially because the more creative you are, the less generally you get paid. You know, in terms of function gigs, you're out of that milieu. So has it changed? It's changed. I would say perhaps, you know, maybe the entertainment aspects of jazz that were the case early on have somewhat dwindled. It's more serious in terms of everybody's got a very serious concept that they're putting down. And, you know, we could probably use a little more fun. You know, it's okay to have fun and play music that's it's got a bounce to it. But having said that, I'm into everything that almost everything I come across, and I would say that having lost some of the icons has shifted. Younger guys are really making the statements and controlling the output. That sounds terrible, but something like that.
Yes. No, well, we could see where you're going with this. It's yeah, it has changed then, because there's less of that spontaneity now, and that's what you were trying to bring back in your album, The Girl from Mochi.
Well, spontaneity wouldn't really be the word, I suppose, because obviously there's a lot of great free players here who are playing spontaneous music all over town, and mine is spontaneous, but it's tunes on that record. Although there's the one Wolfgang, which was really, apart from a head, it's a free tune. And I didn't send you that one, but I really wanted to sound like a saxophone player who has just picked up the instrument for the first time. I don't know if I fully succeeded, but I didn't want to play pretty. I didn't want to play any licks or anything that I have a clue I'm going to do. It was supposed to be sound. It was supposed to be kind of ugly and nasty. Some quite pretty stuff on the record. And this was supposed to be nasty. I had this amazing young drummer who I can't get hold of, Xavier Breaker, and he kicks it with his beats and makes it kind of slightly funkier and more listenable than I'd intended. But yeah, spontaneity, perhaps. I just think some buoyancy, perhaps, would be the word. I want people to feel buoyant and uplifted by it.
How has the pandemic affected your work?
Well, in terms of that project, it wouldn't exist without the pandemic, because the pandemic gave me time to actually think, oh, hell, I did those sessions. I've never, because I do that a lot. I do things and then I move on to the next and I don't follow through. And the sheer boredom of the pandemic made me revisit that stuff. And luckily, Freddie, my engineer, was on board to work with me. And so we got it done. And it was really a big deal for me. In career-wise, otherwise, it was kind of disastrous in some ways. One of the things that I do a lot, I found myself in situations with large groups of people, and I do like to boss people around in those situations. I've shot weddings. I've got a wedding coming up, got to shoot, and manipulating large crowds is because I like to make a photograph where everyone's giving me something. And if you've got 150 people, that involves a lot of shouting. Obviously, I couldn't do that during the pandemic because, I got one wedding gig. It was actually a dear friend of mine, Tamika Reed's wedding, and it was supposed to be at Constellation. And it was the first, photo gig I'd had in a while. I thought, well, I'll map it out so that everybody's 6 foot apart, and we'll make a diamond shape, like a diamond wedding ring or something. And we'll have all the guests in certain positions, and was totally going to do it like that. And then it, numbers changed and we ended up sort of totally different. So it really was impactful in work-wise, but in other ways, I got back into doing artwork, drawing and sketching, and I started working on these long-term projects. They're actually more important really than the little bits and bobs,
Good for you. The cover story in May, was that your pitch, or I think they assigned you, right? The editor assigned you to that?
Sorry?
Downbeat, the cover story that's coming out in May.
Yes.
That was assigned to you. It wasn't a pitch, right?
Well, actually, no. What happened was I went down there to Panama. Your questions are really good. I went down there again, rather wishing to escape from and get some sunshine, get some vitamin D. I mean, obviously, I've been working, taking photographs, but it wasn't. I'd shot the Detroit Jazz Festival for the first time in October because Chicago didn't happen and it was virtual down there. So I went down and it was kind of brutal. We didn't really have anywhere to go outside the hotel. They were on these sound stages. It was an amazing festival, but the Panama Festival had a few headliners that I recognized, and none of them actually could go in the end because of the numbers, so COVID numbers. So I went down and I met some of the local musicians, a wonderful saxophone player called Samuel Batista, who's got his first record coming out. and a trio with an amazing Cuban piano player, Italian drummer, and a blind Irish bass player who's phenomenal, who were up Berkeley, who ended up performing as a trio a lot because the rest of the band didn't show up. And thanks to Danilo keeping me on after he sprung out of quarantine, I had some ideas of stuff where we could shoot. He had ideas, and he's obviously, you know, a Grammy-winning guy with a great reputation as a social activist and beyond. So it's just a great story and needs telling. So the timing hit.
Yes.
I haven't written it there yet, so I've got to get on with it.
Oh, okay. Yes, it was the, yes, you're going to write about it. And you already took the photograph, so you're going to do a lot of, you know, touching up and composing. So it's going to be a wonderful. Okay, now let's do a community assessment with you. WZRD Chicago, being a nonprofit radio station, must be responsible to the community we serve. WZRD is mandated to file quarterly issues with the FCC on non-entertainment, community-focused programming, and we like to assess the community for these quarterly issue topics with 3 questions. First, what is most important to you?
Well, community-wise, I mean, you say a long-term problem. Was that which was the question?
It was the first one. What is most important to you? Because we like to ask 3 questions just to assess what is important to the community. So that helps us develop our quarterly issue topics for the wizards or DJs to do non-entertainment programming. It's like gathering together themes. So the first question for a theme was. For a possible theme is, what is most important to you?
Well, important to me in general, I think, is I'm really invested in spirit lifting, getting to know folk from all walks of life, be it the garbage collector or the barkeep or whoever, and finding out what makes them tick. Perhaps, you know, contributing some way to their day. You know, as a cultural commentator, I feel it's my obligation to direct the general populace in the direction of hit things that are happening in this amazing town. But beyond that, just trying to communicate positivity to the man in the street, the woman in the street.
What long-term problem must we address?
Well, I don't know, there's obviously issues in Chicago. There's a disparity in quality of housing and provisions on the west and south sides of Chicago. You know, adequate healthcare facilities in underserved areas. And a rising problem with, you know, just taxes and cost of living, not squaring with wages, you know, for the average citizen's earnings. I think things are getting out. I mean, it's the same with education, with these super high fees to go to college, and then no way really of paying it back. It's the previous generation's legacy of irresponsibility that now the current generation. This is why I was going to vote for Bernie Sanders on that tip, but also the inequality of, you know, we found this in the pandemic where you only needed to look at the numbers in the Black community that were suffering from, you know, COVID because of, you know, and it's the same with a lot of other things. And food provision. I met a guy the other night at the gallery. I've forgotten his name, but he's involved with a food warehouse that's trying to help people out who's really struggling, you know. I remember when there was all this issue with the freight trains being robbed, you know,
Right.
and there was a lot of ill feeling on the right side of politics. And to me, it was, okay, we're there, you see the desperation. You don't really see, I mean, crime is born out of desperation and lack of just a blind eye having been turned to the needs of the overall community. Yeah.
Mhm. What problem must we resolve now?
Well, the problem of gun violence in America is chronic. And the previous administration are not to be coy about this. Donald Trump in particular glorified, in my opinion, gun violence. You know, as observed in the case of the vigilante chasing down the Sutherland Springs church shooter with an AR-15. And hero that he was, this, this fascination with automatic weapons and the idiotic suggestion that teachers arm themselves. The inability to make grown-up legislation about firearms in the USA is a source of utter incredulity to the rest of the world, given the appalling frequency of mass shootings with automatic weapons. And in Chicago, death on the streets, particularly among young people of color, is just barely talked about at this point by the average person. There should be no assault weapons available to anyone under 25 if they're not in the military. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I would say gun violence for me is it just drives me nuts how nothing continues to be done when people are dying all the time,
Exactly. Well, Michael Jackson, would you like to give, this is first at WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we are about to wrap up our interview with Michael Jackson, journalist and interdisciplinary artist. Michael, would you like to, again, direct our listeners to your upcoming shows and any other parts of your art and your work that you would want our listeners to know about?
Well, I've already mentioned rather gratuitously, I've got a gig this Saturday at the Nick's Beer Garden, 9 p.m. to 12. Come by, 2 75-minute sets. I've got, that'll be with Mark Songston on bass, Avriel Ra on drums, I believe, and if he's available, and D. Bain on piano, and wonderful multi-talented Sofia Sanchez on dance and vocals and guitar and snare and trumpet. And then on Monday, I'll be playing with the incredible Ernie Adams and Sophia and Mark at the Magic Lounge for Valentine's night. Also, this Thursday and subsequent Thursdays in February, I've got some pieces, part of my civil rights series of images of Nina Simone, Megda Evers, and I'm forgetting the other great writer, fabulous black writer, Anne OJ's in there. They're on display along with a lot of other great works at this gallery at 747 Southwestern. That's like a jumbo jet, 747 Southwestern Avenue at the, it's called, there's a Muse coffee shop, but it's called the Gallery of, and it's Black History Month a special, and there's a lot of art there. There's going to be some singing this week with Ashley Dearborn. I think she's going to be singing some a cappella didactic stuff on February, that's the 10th this week. February 17th, they're going to play Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte in Buck and the Preacher, the movie, with the artwork on display. And again, there's like 200 pieces, I think. That's a great thing, organized by Michael Ramstedt and Jay Simon. And yeah, and buy me CD and email me, contact me. You'll love it. I'll send it to you. I promise you'll love it. If you don't love it, if you don't play it twice, a full refund.
Yes.
And hey, Thank you so much for having me. I don't often do things like this.
Oh,
I talk too much, which is a tendency. I apologize, but hopefully there's been a couple of nuggets of nonsense in there for you.
absolutely.
And thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Michael Jackson, for being with us on WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today. Thank you. Be safe.